So good afternoon. I'm told we have a tight timeline, so we'll be quick. A quick introduction. My name is Juliana Chan, and I'm the CEO of Wild Type Media Group. I'm by training a scientist and an academic turned science publisher. Asian Scientist Magazine is what my company is known for. So a warm welcome to Singapore, Cherry, Tarun. So happy to hear your stories today. By 2030, 70% of the global population will live in cities. Some of these will be megacities. So therefore, urbanization is one of the largest demographic changes we will have to deal with in the next decade to come. At the summit today, we have with us 18 young people, the Singapore Summit Young Societal Leaders. You know, the young people have arguably the largest stake in what this future holds for us. So two of them are on stage with me. On my far right is Miss Cherry Artellano. She is the founding farmer and CEO of Agreya Agricultural Systems International. Cherry is helping fishing and farming families develop sustainable and diversified sources of income. And also equally accomplished is Mr. Tarun Sharma, co-founder of Nagrika, a social enterprise dedicated to helping citizens and governments grow small cities. So without further ado, let's start with Cherry. My first question is for you. When it comes to challenges that are linked to urban development, why are you focusing on agriculture and why small farm holders in particular?
Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you so much, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm Cherry from the Philippines. Just to give you a context about urbanization, in the Philippines right now, it's a beautiful country. We have 7,107 islands. And population-wise, we're around 106 million people. However, the problem is because of urbanization, Metro Manila is having now 24.1 million people, which is almost like 4 times the population of Singapore. So what does it mean? It gives a lot of problems in terms of, first, informal settlers are really plenty in Manila because they leave the rural communities to go in the cities. Second one, we have tremendous, which is evident, our traffic in the city. And at the same time, there's really conflict in terms of employment. So what we like to do, I founded Agreya, it's because we have around 12 million hectares of underproductive land in the Philippines, and the best way to go is to be ahead on how to reverse migrate these people in the future. I think when you live in the city, most of the time you just get sick of the situation of the city, and in one point in time, in 10 years or 15 years from now, you need to go back to the countryside. So Agreya, it's actually agriculture plus Gaia, it's Mother Earth. So we focus mostly on sustainable agricultural development. And we have this vision of creating a one-island economy on how, those 7,000 islands can actually be developed in terms of its own resource, which is the forgotten wealth of the Philippines, our people in the countryside, and the wealth of agriculture also, the land. So what we like to do in this one island economy is we work a lot with policymakers, the congressmen, governor, and mayors of this island on how to map out food security and food sufficiency and to establish economic livelihood and opportunities for these people in the countryside so that the people who dwelt in the city could go transfer in the next 10 to 15 years. So far we've been very successful in our work, and we focus on smallholder farmers because we have 4.5 million smallholder farmers in the country because of agrarian reform. And it's a beautiful opportunity to have. It's because it's a resource that is unmanaged, and what we're trying to do is we provide integrated management approach. So we group these farmers with half hectare to 1 hectares of land to have an economies of scale. So we form them into cooperative associations or people organizations so that they can establish their own business. And aside from that, we also put up a farm school which we teach the farmers on sustainable agricultural livelihood, at the same time farm business. So in such way, when the farmers are grouped, it's so easy to have access to government support. It's so easy to have access to financial institution because they have bigger and larger collateral to go to financial institution. And education-wise, it's also easy to manage them. And the most perfect example that we've been doing, my company works with B2B, so we work with big pharmaceutical companies, big corporations in the Philippines on how they can actually source back in the farmers that we work with. So it's been happening, and the work is actually being replicated in other island provinces in the Philippines by our governors and congressmen.
Thank you, Cherry. So Tarun has a very interesting story, and it involves a road trip. So I'll let him tell you the story that led to forming Nagrika.
Yeah, I think I'll build the context from one of the numbers that you mentioned, that about 70% of the world population is likely to be urban. In India, we have 377 million people living in cities right now, and which is 31% of the total India's population, and this number is likely to become 50% by 2049. Out of these 377 million people, 70% right now lives in cities less than 1 million, and 50% of the same population lives in cities less than 0.5 million. So it was in this context I'd been working for a long time with big cities, with the Federal Ministry of Urban Development, and we had this feeling that the discourse of urban development, urbanization was being shaped completely by bigger cities. So the road trip that you mentioned was a journey across 50 small cities around India over a period of about 5 months that we took in the monsoons of 2015. And it was this road trip which kind of spurred us to start Nagrik, and I would not even say it spurred us. It kind of jolted us to start Nagrik, because it was not so much that we saw, but it was what we did not hear, which was the voice of these small cities. And these small cities were not present when it came to make decisions for them, whether it was in terms of what infrastructure gets laid, what kind of industry should be put in those cities, what kind of economic structure should these cities follow. It was like in India, we always say that our kids are always asked to become doctors, engineers, and it was like these cities were being asked to just become big cities. So, and both me and my wife Yutika, who's also co-founder of Nagrik, come from really small cities. I come from a city of about 80,000 people, and my wife from a city of 15,000 people. And we had seen this way of life being eroding in small cities as well. I live in a neighborhood which has 26 households. At the turn of the century, there were 110 people living in that house, in that community, and right now there are only 45 people left. Everybody has gone, and they are in Delhi, Gurgaon, the metro centers close by. So it was this sense of erosion of way of life of small cities, and this decision making that was not in the hands of small cities, that we decided to form Nagrik to give voice to small cities. And now the way we are functioning is we're using knowledge as a tool. Knowledge is a tool to give voice to the issues of small cities, so whether it is at the national forum, so we are working with small cities to identify the issues. We are working with few smaller municipal corporations in India to inform so we're talking about Agenda 2030, so we are actually working to inform the Agenda 2030, especially when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goal 11, that what should be the targets and goals when it comes to sustainable urban development that these cities should be assessed against, because these cities did not have a voice when these targets were assigned to them. But now, through our work, we are able to share it with the national government, and through that, with the HLPF and the high-level political forums at UN, that these indicators don't work for these cities. All of these cities have different context. They have different priorities. They have different aspirations. They all don't want to become bigger cities. So that was the context in which we took the journey. And
thank you, Tarun. If you have any questions from the audience, please do submit them to the app. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Cherry about something I'm very interested in. It seems to me that you're working on a bill, a very important bill that you hope will pass in Congress someday. Could you share with us more about it?
So right now we're actually working on a bill. It's called Magna Carta for rural women, or Magna Carta on women in agriculture specifically. It's because yes, Philippines is really leading in terms of women empowerment and gender equality. However, it's really not trickling down on the rural communities. So for example, when you're a female farmer, your salary is actually 25 cents, lower than a male farmer. So, like for example, in Siargao Island, where we work with, we provide consultancy support to the governor and the congressman of the island, as well as the 9 mayors. And we found out, because island of Siargao now is the #1 island by Condé Nast because of the surfing. It's a surfing destinations. In the next 2 years, they'll receive 2 million visitors in every year. However, there's a massive problem, because since it's a surfing capital, every time there's surfing, the food cannot enter because of the waves are bigger, the ferries cannot travel. So in working with them, we found out that the men farmers are actually leaving the countryside to be service providers in tourism industry. So we work with the women, and the congressman of this island is now the author of the bill. I'm trying to work on to draft, and we're putting it in the Congress, hopefully in the next 2 months. And our target is for next year, it can be in the Senate desk. So it will empower more women in the agriculture.
Well done, Cherry. And Tarun, tell us more about what you saw on that trip. What do you think are the problems and the challenges that you want to overcome in the design of small cities?
So I think one of the things that we encountered was this one size fits all. We have about 4,000 cities in India. And right now I'm talking about India, but this is the same situation in most of the Asian countries as well, where we have a top-down urban hierarchical model. So one of the biggest city that you might have in a region, for example, Bangalore, is about 10 million. The second biggest city is Mysore, which is about 1/10 the size of Bangalore. But the policies that are designed for Mysore are informed by the same policies that the same problem that Bangalore is facing. So what we were seeing during our road trip city after city was that there were different needs and priorities that cities had, but the policies that were designed were one size fits all. So for example, we were in a coastal town called Ratnagiri, where it had been a trading port for a long time, and it had a very flourishing fishing industry. But there were no colleges which could teach people to go back in the same industry. And there were a lot of vocational training institutes which were teaching people to become computer engineers and technicians, but this was something that was not happening. We were in another heritage city in Tamil Nadu, where there are only 10 families left which can make this classical stringed instrument called Veenai. And in the last 2 generations, the number of families that can make this Veenai have reduced by half. There is nobody to take over this profession and this skill to the next generation, and the amount of money that they can get from this skill is again reduced by half. And these families share their concern with us that there are policies which are setting up call centers in the city, but there is nobody who's willing to invest in teaching people this profession. So we saw so many professions, so many industries, so many festivals which were dying a slow death because, again, they were trying to conform themselves to an economic order which was prevailing in bigger cities.
How about some communities? Are there peoples and groups that you want governments to include more in the conversation?
Yeah, I think when it comes to one size fits all, it's again because you would try to create solutions which can get companies which have expertise at a global level or a national level. But there are so many stakeholders and so many organizations at the local level which have the same interest, motivations, and expertise. So a lot of faith-based organizations and religious institutes, a lot of voluntary organizations like clubs, they are working on issues like sustainability. They are investing a lot in increasing the green cover. There are resident welfare associations which are looking at the safety and security of the regions. So they tend to get ignored and excluded. And a lot of investment that happens in building capacities also kind of keeps them out from the decision making.
So I'm just going to use this opportunity, for Cherry and Tarun. I'm going to ask you the same question. How can the people we are looking at in the audience, the key decision makers in the room who represent some of the most influential public and private organizations, how can they help your group of 18 young societal leaders such as yourself? Cherry.
Juliana, I've been in agriculture for 21 years, right? I started teaching farmers at the age of 12 in my dad's farm in a sugarcane plantation. And for the last 21 years, my problem is really access to financial support. Right, so 2 years ago, we started an impact fund that focused on agricultural investments as long as they follow the ESG, environmental, social, and governance structure. So this fund is actually based in Singapore. I'm a partner of this fund, and we do investments on agricultural businesses in the Philippines. I'm so happy that Myanmar officer was here because we're trying to invest on rice and coffee in Myanmar. We're also working in Timor-Leste for coffee plantations in Timor, also in Vietnam, in Thailand, and in Indonesia. So our hub is here in Singapore because what we like to do is how the wealth can be also shared in these Asian countries, but focus on agricultural development, that the purpose is to go into sustainability. So it's very fulfilling and it's very meaningful to have. And so the fund right now is trying to really build this impact on those countries, and more importantly on helping the agri-sector and the agri-businesses to be established.
Before we get to Tarun, Cherry, you will be going to New York next week for something. Could you share with us what that is?
Oh, so I'm going to New York next week because I'll be appointed as a high-level ambassador on Scale Up Nutrition Movement, and at the same time present the Impact Hub, the Impact Fund in agriculture in Southeast Asia, because there's now a force on the demand for consumers on sustainable products, but at the same time there's also somehow an influx of financial institutions gearing towards impactful investments. So I'll be presenting that in the UN by next week.
Well done. All the best for your Impact Fund. And of course, Tarun, a message for the audience.
As I shared earlier, that we are using knowledge as a tool to bring the voice of small cities to the urbanization discourse. So I think there is a lot that we can learn from the people in this room, and we can get a lot of support. One, in terms of mentorship, there's a lot of experience that people in this room have. So either as mentors to the organization, financial and technical support. So we're working with small cities whose knowledge and experience is limited when it comes to tackling some of the current challenges. We are working on creating a physical urban knowledge resource center, which can be a peer learning center for not just small cities in India, but probably in Asia as well. So I would like to ask the people in this room if they share a vision of a balanced urban regional development in whole of Asia. Would be happy to take your support. Yeah.
Thank you, Tarun. So Cherry and Tarun, both of you have pretty much gone against the grain, pardon the pun. We all look at cities and bigger cities, mega cities. Cherry is looking at the rural farmers, and of course, Tarun is looking at the knowledge we can gain from small cities. So to all the members of the audience, I would like to issue a call to action to invite you to meet the 18 young societal leaders seated among you. Just imagine the impact they could achieve with your support and mentorship. So could you please join me in giving a round of applause, though, for these speakers on stage, Cherry and Tarun.